Why don't we get started then with the next session? And what we'll try and do is kind of do 5 or 10 minutes from each of the speakers, and then try and have as much time for Q&A, I think, as we can. But really privileged to have a panel here. We actually have an all Texas lineup up here of projects. That are big opportunities going forward. I think all of these folks will be able to talk about things that are almost ready to go, what is needed to get them fully up and running. And I think you'll see a lot of the same themes we were talking about earlier around asset reuse, land value capture, and other things come up as well in the discussion. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Michael Skelly with Clean Line Energy to talk about the Plains and Eastern Line project.
Great, thanks very much. So Clean Line Energy, what we do is we develop power lines that run from the best wind resources in the country to major load centers. And the founders of the company, many of us worked at a company called Horizon Wind, which was family owned and then owned by Goldman, bought the company from the family, then sold it to EDP. And about 8 years ago, we looked around the renewable space and said, the world probably doesn't need another wind developer, but we sure do need a lot more transmission lines. So what we're working on, and we've been at for about 8 years now, is putting together lines from the best wind resources to major load centers. And here's a quick map of the projects. So the theme here is tie in the best wind and move it to places on the grid where you can move a lot of power. And the reason I'm up here and not one of the big utilities in the United States is, as we looked at the grid, we said, okay, the incumbents are, because we have a fairly balkanized ownership of the grid, and most electric utilities are sort of state-based. So Oklahoma Gas and Electric, they don't wake up in the morning saying, how do I get power to Atlanta? And Southern in Atlanta doesn't think, or Alabama Power, they don't think, how do I get access to that great low-cost energy resource in the middle of the country? And at a different time, the government might have built lines like this, but we're not at that particular moment. So that felt like an opportunity to us. And so what we've done is, we sort of put together these projects. And today I'll talk a little bit about the Plains and Eastern project, which is the first project we began working on. And we spent many years going through a very, very robust public input process with literally 15,000 or maybe 20,000 discrete meetings and comments where people weighed in on where the line ought to go and where the line ought not to go. As we talk about expediting projects and processes, we actually don't think that that's the part of the process that one should rush. It's really important to get that right, because otherwise you're going to end up with a project that doesn't meet the needs of all the stakeholders. So several years of that. And then we went through a process with the Department of Energy under some provisions of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. And that resulted in a ROD. In this group, you can say ROD, but a record of decision from the Department of Energy saying that effectively, if we, once we meet certain conditions precedent, under this public-private partnership, once we meet these conditions precedent, if we run across a flawed title or a situation where we can't track down the owners of the land, or we can't transact with somebody to get an easement for the overhead power line, then the Department of Energy will step in and acquire that easement on our behalf, which is in a linear infrastructure project. That's the most important piece of it. So you have to go through all the permitting, and so we went through a whole multi-year NEPA process, and then that formed the basis for the Department of Energy to make a decision as to whether or not they would participate in the project. As part of the public-private partnership, DOE gets a percentage of the revenues from the project, and there's all sorts of different conditions that they hold us to in terms of how we work with landowners, the process that we use to acquire easements, the payments to landowners, the pilot type payments to counties, et cetera, et cetera. That, needless to say, an agreement like that this is a public document. If you're really interested in this stuff, you can find it on the web. But very involved discussion and robust process that went into formulating that. Both the NEPA process and the DOE 1222 decision were publicly scoped processes with comment periods, et cetera, et cetera. And so we got all that done a little under a year ago, and with that in hand, the next big step on the project, there's really four. One is the building of the line, and BJ Ducey from Quanta Services here, they will be the EPC contractor to build the line. General Electric will provide the almost $1 billion worth of very high-tech converter stations, which take the power from AC to DC and then back again. That allows for much more efficient transmission of energy. So they're working away at getting all the designs ready to go. We are, the other piece is financing, so we're backed by some good investors to carry us through the development process. And then as we complete, then this is sort of our next big mountain to climb, is commercializing the project. And one of the challenges with a big project like this is, this is what makes it really exciting, is that we'll move 4,000 megawatts of power. And in doing so, we're going to open up an area of Oklahoma to new energy development that would otherwise not take place, because there's no point in building wind farms out in the Oklahoma Panhandle if you don't have any way to get to market. But if you add up all the nameplate capacity of what we will enable, you get to you do some overbuilding and optimization and so on. But it'll be the second largest power plant in the United States, second only to the Grand Coulee Dam, which, as y'all probably know, was built in the 1930s. So the opportunity is really exciting. Our project will cost around $2.5 billion. We're about we're about 130 million into the development of this particular project. So it's very, very expensive from a project development perspective. But the reward is exciting because we're going to build a $2.5 billion project with and as y'all know, there's a lot of capital anxious to invest in this sort of thing. So the next stage of the project is to commercialize it. So we're in conversations with just about every utility in the southeastern United States. They're interested in getting access to this low-cost renewable energy. And we hope to have enough contracts wrapped up by the end of the year that we can get into construction by the end of the year, early next year. And needless to say, there have been many ups and downs in a process like this, because we've been through everything from votes in the United States Senate to kill the project, to not great decisions at public service commissions, to working with opposition, et cetera, and just doing something big and new. So a big line. We haven't done major HVDC projects in the United States in 30-some years. In China, they knock these out about every 3 or 4 months. But the grid operators and the incumbent utilities aren't accustomed to this technology, nor are they accustomed to projects of this magnitude. So working through all those different processes has been presented all kinds of interesting challenges along the way. But we're excited about where we are. As y'all know, infrastructure development is not for the faint of heart or light of wallet. But the rewards are really exciting, and in part because you enable all this new generation. But things like we worked, a company called Setiver from France came to us a few years ago wanting to sell us insulators, and we said, that's great. We will put a factory in Arkansas, and we will buy all our insulators from you. And so they did. Last week I was at the ribbon cutting of that factory. Now we got to deliver on our end and build the line so that they have other customers in the U.S., but they're counting on us to come through. And just seeing folks with new, exciting career opportunities in that factory, that's the kind of thing that makes working on these projects worth all the time and effort. So thank you very much.
That's great. Next up is Dave Schultz with Dallas Area Rapid Transit, and I think he's going to talk about a light rail type project in the Dallas area, if I'm not mistaken.
I surely am. Thank you very much. It's a delight to be back with the folks here at CGLA today to talk about DART and some of the exciting things that are happening in North Texas. DART is a regional transportation authority. We cover a 700 square mile service area in North Texas. We serve 13 cities who provide a sales tax for us. It's our primary source of revenue. DFW is the fourth largest metropolitan area in the country, and we're quickly growing. We're on track by 2025 to be a mega region with a population of over 10 million people. Our function in and amongst all of that is to provide infrastructure that helps to move people around from where they are to where they need to be, whether it's from home to work, to healthcare, to education. We connect all of those major institutions in our region and are constantly planning for how we'll need to do that in the future. Our agency is currently in the midst of completing a plan that will set out what will look like in 2040 and the capital investments that we'll need to make between now and then to make sure that we do have the transportation infrastructure in place to move the folks in our community. But we are truly at the heart of moving North Texas forward at DART. The specific project that I want to talk about today is our Cotton Belt Rail Corridor project. This project is a 26-mile long line that runs from Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport on its western terminus and connects through 8 different cities into Shiloh Road, which is just to the east of downtown Plano. The project will provide mobility and access to employment centers and to this center of population growth that we are seeing in North Texas, because it's the cities and counties to the north of Dallas proper that are seeing the largest growth, and they're projected to continue to grow in the years to come. This project is exciting because it interfaces with 3 of our existing light rail lines. You can see that it connects with our red line, our green line, and our orange line at DFW Airport, and will provide major opportunities for investment along the line in the way of transit-oriented development and other economic drivers for the area. Also significant at DFW Airport is a connection between the Cotton Belt and the TexRail project that's being built by the Fort Worth Transportation Authority. TexRail will connect DFW Airport into downtown Fort Worth, and with our Cotton Belt project, we'll have a 1-seat ride from Plano all across the northern part of the Metroplex into downtown Fort Worth. It'll be a 54-mile corridor when it's done. So that's really significant. The project is in a phase right now where we are seeking public input, and I share Mike's view that the public process is not one that we want to shortchange, because this investment that we're making in our community is for the benefit of the community. And we do everything that we can to make sure that we talk to all of our stakeholder groups, all of our neighborhoods, all the individuals that have an interest in the project, and make sure that to the best that we can, we answer their concerns. In our experience, that's really key to a successful project, and we're certainly committed to that on the Cotton Belt. The public involvement project is part of our preparation of an environmental impact statement, and we are looking at a phased approach to the project, not in its entire length, but into those sections where we're double track versus single track. Those of you that know about transportation, public transit, know that you've got a lot more operational flexibility when you double track the whole corridor. But in order to make the project work economically, we're going to double track only at those areas that we need right now for passings so that we can achieve a 30-minute headway along the corridor. Again, because we are on an active rail corridor, and because we're going to be going on to airport property, and we're a public transportation project, those of you that are familiar with the approval processes are perhaps a little bit curious how we're going to deal with FTA, FRA, and FAA all at the same time. We are aware of that because of our prior involvements at both Love Field Airport and DFW Airport, and because we do operate a commuter rail line. We've coordinated that FTA will be the lead agency and that they'll then be responsible for coordinating with the others. And we're comfortable with the approach and that we'll be able to move through with all three of those agencies simultaneously rather than trying to do them consecutively. And so we're hoping to have some efficiencies in that regard. We're real excited about the funding for this project. It's largely in place. We're taking advantage of the Railroad Improved Infrastructure Fund loan that was made available starting in 2009. We've pre-filed our loan application documents, and those of you that are familiar with that program know that it's an advantageous financing tool. It's actually a loan that'll be repaid. We'll carry it on our books as though it were bond financing, but the interest rate will be at Treasury. You see 3 FTA funding sources there. Those are all coming to us kind of through different channels, through our Metropolitan Planning Organization, through direct grants from FTA, and then of course the formula operating funds that'll be coming in. The $87 million that you see at the bottom of the chart there is reserved for different sources to come in, and we've been talking with the cities along the corridor and have gotten commitments from them for specific funding, various parts that benefit their cities, and also we've got room in there for other financing sources and value capture methods that we're exploring with different land developers and other private parties that have an interest in perhaps not the whole corridor, but in specific sections of it. The vehicle that we're going to use is something that we've developed for the North Texas region. We call it the Regional Rail Vehicle. And those of you that know the Dallas system understand that our light rail system has got a rather large light rail vehicle. On this corridor, we're not planning to go an electric route, but we are looking for other alternative fuels to use in this self-powered vehicle. It'll be about the same, have the same profile as our light rail vehicle, so that it'll have the same look and feel of the other things that we're using in our region. It'll allow us cross corridor capabilities, and it'll be consistent with the vehicle that the Fort Worth system is building, so that they'll be able to run their vehicles on our half of the line, and similarly we'll be able to run on theirs. This vehicle has been proven in concept, and you'll currently see that in use on the Denton County line that runs from the north of the dark green line up into Denton County. We're on schedule to have service operating by 2022 on this project. We're currently in a process where we're requesting qualifications from firms that might like to bid on a design-build project delivery scheme for this project. So if you haven't been involved in that, see me right away. We'll get you plugged in to get your qualifications into the consideration loop. We expect to issue a request for proposal from those qualified firms this coming September, and we'll get our final environmental and our record of decision. We're expecting that in March of 2018, and then in April of next year, we'll be anticipating award of our construction contract. There's contact information for our procurement group, and it's always a delight to be here and talk to you about DART projects.
Thanks very much, Dave. Last, and then we'll open it up for questions. We have Mike Heitman, who's the CEO of Garney Construction. I think going to talk about a very interesting pipeline-related effort in the San Antonio area. So,
thanks, Jeff.
Moving from Houston to Dallas to San Antonio, we've got it all covered.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Garney Construction, if you guys aren't familiar with us, we're a water and wastewater contractor based in Kansas City, and we build water and wastewater systems throughout the U.S. This is a great example I'm about to show you of a water P3 project that is underway, and we actually are delivering pipe as we speak and start installing it next month. So this is called the Vista Ridge water line, and it is basically a water line to serve the city of San Antonio's future water needs. So several years ago, the city of San Antonio put out an RFP to basically ask companies to provide proposals to deliver water to them. And we teamed up to submit a proposal, and we were chosen. So this is a situation where true P3, where SAWS has they shifted the risk to our team. We're required to get the right-of-way, we're required to get the permitting, the financing, we're required to operate it for 30 years. So it was a true shift of that risk to the private sector, and San Antonio is just obligated to pay only when and if the water is delivered to their city limits. So the project is about 140 miles long, 54-inch and 60-inch pipeline running from kind of south of Austin all the way to the north side of San Antonio. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a 30-year concession, so our team, after construction is complete, will operate the pipeline for 30 years. The total expenditure for the project is $927 million. We have private financing in place for 92% of that, or $853 million, and then the Garney provided the equity of $74 million. We have 80% of the equity share on that, so that Garney contributed to get the project off the ground. This is a diagram of the pipeline route. It, like I said, runs from south of Austin to the north side of San Antonio. We have about 92% of the right-of-way acquired. We have the 404 permit is in place, and our Section 7 consultation with Fish and Wildlife is complete, so all of our environmental permits are in place. And like I said, we are taking pipe and start laying pipe next week. So this is a great example of privately financed, privately developed water infrastructure. And it has taken many years for us to get to the point where we are right now. The environmental process was long and arduous, and it's great that we've got that behind us now. There was the Fish and Wildlife Review of endangered species. We didn't encounter any. We did have habitat that was conducive to 3 endangered species, and spent many months investigating that and did not encounter any. But we went ahead, despite that, and set up a habitat, or we're building a habitat conservation area. We did put out, one of the endangered species is the blind spider. I didn't know there was a blind spider until I built this project. So we had to put out little peanut butter traps for many months, and we didn't catch any blind spiders, so we were able to get past that hurdle. But that was one process we went through that took us a while. I didn't know they liked peanut butter, but they do. This is just kind of
the smell. That's how they find it.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know.
I won't go through this in detail, but the project has 18 wells. I mentioned the pipeline length, 4 cooling towers. Believe it or not, the water, well, I guess it's probably believable down in Texas, but the water comes out of the ground at about 105 degrees, so we actually have to cool it down before we deliver it to the city of San Antonio. 3 pump stations, small. The water is extremely clean, but we do have a small amount of chemical pH balancing system that we are building. And then we've got a fiber optic and radio control system we're laying along with the pipeline. I won't go into details either, but this just shows the major parties of the contract. We set up a special purpose vehicle to be the concessionaire. serving for the project for the San Antonio water system. Then you've got the lenders on the right, the equity on the lower right of that we're a part of, and then the EPC contractor in the upper left is Garney. We are the EPC contractor as well. And then the O&M contractor for the next 30 years is being interviewed now. We're finalizing the negotiations with O&M contractors to determine who that will be. So this just shows you our timeline. We are right at kind of that middle red line. We reached financial close last fall, and we have, like I said, are starting construction. We have 42 months to build the project, so we anticipate being done about 36 months from now. And then at that point, we will begin commercial operation. And after 30 years, then the entire system is turned over to the city of San Antonio. So again, a great example of private investment, a great example of the overlap of all the affected parties and stakeholders in a project sitting at a table and working together to design the most efficient system, looking at life cycle costs and everything. Because when you've got private equity involved, they're going to demand that, they're going to require that to get the return on their investment. And we just think it's a great model. They're not seeing that much in the water industry, so we obviously hope that this will be a model of many future water projects in the U.S. So I think that's the last of my, this just kind of verifies or clarifies who the different parties are. I think I've already talked about all these. We have the lenders are led by SMBC, along with about 6 or 7 members of the bank group. So that's all.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we'd like to open it up now for questions. Actually, just following off yours, Mike, maybe I'll start with the first one, and then we'll look for hands in the group. But to your point, if you look around the world, there aren't a lot of water P3s relative to other areas. Just be curious, and what allowed the conditions, for this to happen, and do you see a lot of potential to do these kind of things in other places?
Every state's different, so it's going to be difficult to, a lot, and most of it just has to do with education. Texas is pretty progressive in the P3 world, and they're also very developer friendly. So the environment and the regulations in Texas are one of the big reasons why this was able to move forward. And I think it's just, and most of the consultants and the lenders and advisors that we use in this project are all from outside the U.S. because that's how it's procured outside the U.S. So it's just really education and getting the owners in the U.S. comfortable that this project delivery method can be successful. And it's just a paradigm shift of putting people see as a very crucial public utility and water in the hands of private developers. There's just kind of a stigma against that. So I think it really boils down to education and plus the ownership of water utilities around the U.S. is so fractured. There's so many different water utilities and municipalities that own these systems that it's difficult. You're not dealing with a small number of large utilities. So.
Great, very helpful. Questions from the group? Do we have one? Oh, good.
So what will the public see in the way of water rates as a result of the project?
I can't tell you specifically what the rate is now and what we'll go up to. I can find that out. But the rates are going, they've started raising rates several years ago. San Antonio also built a desal plant, so they are extremely short on water. So they're really building systems. They're building our system and the desal plant to basically serve their water needs because San Antonio is growing so fast. So they're raising their water rates. I can't tell you whether they're doubling or tripling, but yeah, their rates are going up. And it's not, the cost of the water we're providing, it's not cheap, but it's one of those deals where it's expensive water right now, but in 30 years they're paying the exact same rate 30 years from now that they're going to be paying here in 3 years. And in 30 years from now, the last kind of half of the model gets extremely efficient for them. So they're investing now, kind of swallowing that pill. Mm-hmm.
For Michael and David, just curious, your perspective, having gone through a lot of these pretty long processes to get these projects to fruition, are there lessons learned in terms of what we could be doing more systematically to go faster? Given you see a lot of studies, in rail and other things, it says our cost per mile delivered is like double what it is in Europe, as an example, mostly due to time. Just curious, things in your guys' mind that could actually be done in a more expedited fashion.
Well, one of the things that I mentioned that we found to be helpful is just a lot of communication. I mean, a lot of communication from the owner's perspective. As a public entity, we're kind of the mindset that the compliance is really important and that process is important. So we don't approach it from the perspective as much of how many dollars does the process cost us, but what does the process yield for us. And if the process yields for us a safe and effective system that takes into account the views and perspectives of our stakeholders, well, then the process has served a purpose. Would we be able to bring things online faster if instead of taking 6 months to get through FTA, something would take 3 months or 9 months, or whatever the time period is, if that can be reduced. Certainly that helps our customers and helps our community to grow and helps us to provide the infrastructure at a faster pace. And so we certainly, would look forward to working through the different options that might be presented. And, our agency is like I said, in communication with the regulators to let them know what the impacts to us are.
Yeah, I mean, I would say with begging Sheryl Sandberg's forgiveness, I'd say we need to lean in on infrastructure in this country. And it's great to hear President Trump talking about it, and I know the team is coming together and they're going to work through some of these regulatory delays and so on. But a lot of the delays that you run into, it's not like one thing. It's the accumulation of 100 things that are delayed by a couple of weeks each. And that really adds up, particularly since to do these projects, you have to do many, many things in series. You want to do as many things as possible in parallel. Permitting processes don't always work in parallel. So the more parallel processing that we can do, the better. And then if we could create some sort of sense of we're going to do new things in infrastructure as well. So we have no issues doing new things in computing, and we're getting there on new things in transportation. But sometimes we're one of the things that our opposition says about us, well, we've never done that, law has never been used before, or we've never done a project like that. And you go, well, wait a minute, aren't we the country that wants to try and do new things? And if we can get or instill more of a sense of let's do new things in infrastructure, which is really exciting to hear about the water project, because that is a new sort of way of doing things. But if we could create a sense that doing new things is actually a very good thing, just like it for infrastructure, just like it is in many of the other things that we do, I think that'd be helpful. And that applies, in particular to the electric power space, which is, they're monopolies. They, by law, they get to make money because they get a government set rate of return on their investment, either from the states or the feds. And they're run by folks who, by virtue of their job, because their job is to keep the lights on, they're conservative in their outlook. And that's a good thing in many respects. But it doesn't always lead to sort of the embrace of innovation. So more of that in the electric power sector would certainly be very helpful.
That's great. Other questions?
Jeff, I think we're going to keep you on time. But
Perfect.
I wanted to say one thing about this panel that's really interesting. if you look at the panel, right, you've got electricity transmission, you've got transit with a value capture piece, and you've got a P3 in water and water conveyance. I mean, that, as Skelly was suggesting, would be transformative for our country, because getting you guys going, or the demonstration projects, and you're already up and running, Mike, is incredible. I mean, how much money are we really talking about if you were to modernize our electricity transmission grid? Just give me the number.
Well, I mean, so there's two numbers you want to look at. One is what does it cost to do that, and that's, in the tens of billions, probably not hundreds of billions, but many tens of billions. And the other is the benefit. And what we're seeing with, and sorry, this is a Texas panel, so I'll give you another Texas example. But what happened in Texas? We expanded the grid to the tune of about $7 billion. Now we have much better access to all the resources in Texas, from gas to wind to solar. We've got dramatically more efficient energy markets, so that you don't have a situation where prices are really low in one place and really high in another, because the power can flow. And we've seen it, $7 billion is a decent shot in the arm for the state, and for companies like Quanta that have operations, and we build towers in the state and so on. So it's the value that you get out of this, and it's not just like the next 10 years. These are investments that will be around, in all these cases, for a century.
No, and if you think about what Dave's talking about, I mean, when Gretchen was talking about the value capture piece, the order of magnitude difference between 300 million and 2 billion, and I bet it goes up to 4 or 5 billion, is just huge. And you guys are repurposing a freight line, which is phenomenal, right, in terms of a light rail, which then anchors a whole new set of developments.
Oh, absolutely. There's a new development going in just outside of DFW Airport called Cypress Waters. And the whole development is built around the notion that one day we'll have a rail station there. Now, they haven't done a lot of development in that area where the station will be, but they understand the value of that transportation component into that development community. And so, we're eager to find the right partner to work with on that station site
But they also understand that things get done in Texas, so someday means someday, before your children are grown or whatever.
Before 2022.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, let's give the panel a big hand. Thank you very much, you guys.